It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the session, The Bengal Delta, Riverine Landscape, the July Revolution, and Reconstructive Political Order. We are honored to have with us a very distinguished panel, Dr. Iftekhar Iqbal, Associate Professor, University Brunei Darussalam, Dr. Alice Tawang Wang Lee, Professor, Philosophy and Cultural Studies, the Director of the Center for Technology in Humanities, Kyung University, Korea. Dr. Irfan Ahmad, Professor, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Department of Sociology, even Haldun University. And Dr. Perween Hasan, Art Historian and Vice Chancellor of Central Women's University, Dhaka. May I now request Dr. Perween Hasan to moderate this session and begin the session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As we are running short of time, I've been asked to be economical with my time as possible. So without further ado, I call this session to order. And I would like to invite Dr. Iftekhar Iqbal, Associate Professor of University of Brunei Darussalam, to deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
The chair of the session, Professor Perween Hasan, distinguished colleagues, ladies, gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning. Grateful to be here, and I thank the organizers and volunteers for working tirelessly to make this event happen. I should start by noting that the Bangladesh Revolution of 2024 has not marked some of the usual boxes for modern South Asian history. And first, it did not rally around the iconic figures. Number two, it did not flourish by glorifying or vilifying historical time stamps like 1971 or 1947. Thirdly, this revolution, or rather the revolutionary actors, were not weighed down by the idea of identity politics, whether Muslims, Bengali Muslims, or Muslim first or Bengali first, as Professor Mushtaq Khan was suggesting this morning. And fourthly, they did not suffer from the problem of self-doubt, making them unable to think and act clearly, to perform, practice, and to bring about changes. So, in other words, rather than investing further in the nationhood, or rather imagined nation, the revolutionaries, if I may call that, if we use the term, hinged on the operability of the state, rather than the imagined nation. And which means the question of citizenship in the form of equity, justice, institutional democracy, and a set of other universals. For the same reason, the boundaries that we have set for ourselves for debates about the whole saga revolve around 1947 and 71 and even 1990, when the fall of Ershad took place. I think there is a scope, because of the nature of the revolution or the changes, we can look beyond these modern colonial and post-colonial frameworks. And right now I'm thinking of taking you to a point where we can say we need to think about a structural history rather than history of individuals or history of particular dates. So that will take you to a long time from now. I'll take a long durée and deep historical turn, not so deep, but deep indeed from our point of view. So I will take you to 14th and 15th century. So as our student of history know that as Sultani period. First, I will briefly outline the nature of this structure. Second, I will try to outline the underlying forces that sustained it, and thirdly, their resonance or lack of it with the revolutionary moment of 2024 and now. So I'll be very quick because there is a time crunch here. So in terms of the structure of the Sultani era, first comes the question of culture. So the Sultani era represents an inclusive and powerful cultural revolution, the first of its kind in South Asia after the Buddhist revolution in the 6th century BCE. Like in the time of Buddha, Bengal witnessed both cultural transformation and political resistance against the lingering dominance of the Brahmanic Upper Indo-Gangetic powers. A dynamic, synthetic language developed, incorporating Sanskrit, Pali, Arabic, Persian, and vernacular elements, producing a vast literary corpus. As the Abbasid did in Baghdad with the Greco-Roman knowledge, through translation and interpretation, the Bengal sultans patronized the same with the Sanskrit corpus, commissioning translations of Mahabharata and Ramayana, among many others literary works. And in fact, the cultural production took almost an industrial scale, if you say so. The ethos and power of the Bangla cultural linguistic complex were so profound that in the early 17th century, poet Abdul Hakim could argue that anyone biased against Bangla was rootless without an identity. Yet, the notion that persists even today is that Bengali Muslims suffer from an identity crisis. This persistence of the idea that Bengali Muslims are suffering from identity crisis is because our interpretive lens is modernist. Compared to the inclusive and cosmopolitanism of the Sultani era, the Bengal resistance of the 19th century was a colonially coded, narrow-based phenomenon. Similarly, in light of its scope and aspirations, the 1952 language movement appears as a mere residue of the Sultani linguistic revolution. The second aspect of the Sultani historical structure is the civil society. I know this term might be problematic to describe what was happening in pre-modern times, but nevertheless, I'm using this term to convey the idea of groups that enjoyed relative autonomy from the state. So in that light, one such force was the Sufis, of course, most of us know, who addressed the spiritual and social needs of a growing Muslim and often non-Muslim population on the margins of the society. Sufi-centered communities thrived around the Khanqa, which combined at least 4 elements of social organizations: mosques, madrasa, shelter for travelers and the homeless, and charity. Other activities included maintaining bridges, water tanks, and often even sometimes small river ports. So Sufis were not all hermetic. They were at the center of the social activities. And together these represented a spiritual, moral authority that blended religious, social, and economic functions as much as probably as better socially embedded and organic institution of well-being than today's NGOs in a way. Another component of civil society during Sultani era was the Vaishnavites, who among others Sri Chaitanya can be seen as a civil society leader. He had direct access to the Sultan but retained his autonomy. Thirdly, there is this question of justice. And as we all know, these semi legendary anecdotes that Sultan Ghiyasuddin Azam Shah, who while playing polo accidentally killed a widow's son, the widow sought justice and the Qazi summoned the Sultan to court. Reportedly, the Sultan appeared as an ordinary defendant, accepted admonition and compensated the widow. Whether this exact incident took place or not, the story reflects an aura of the time. The people at the margin trusted the judiciary upheld the trust, and the idea of separation of power was not strange or foreign. Even the highest authority was not beyond moral compass. Now, in terms of economic vitality that underpinned the Sultani era, I would just note that by the late 16th century, the Delta provided about 40% of India's revenue, roughly about 5% of world GDP, an extraordinary figure. And Adam Smith actually praised in his Wealth of Nations the Bengal's rivers for underpinning this such prosperity. Now, the big question is, what sustained this 2 centuries of Bengal structural development of Bengal in 15th and 16th century, 14th and 15th century? One, there might be a number of reasons. One would be what I'd be calling Delhi deterrence. And actually, although it sounds very, academic, but most of our undergraduate students in history know that this is not a new story. So the Delhi deterrence took place, manifested in several ways. One was, of course, in the 14th century, Samsuddin Ilyas Shah united the Bengal Delta as a whole and called himself the Shahi Bangala, and he dealt a strategic blow to Firoz Shah Tughlaq from Delhi in a monsoon battle in Malda. And this resulted in the treaty that kept Bengal beyond Delhi's reach for the next 200 years. This gave way to the development of a Bengal polity and geopolitics of its own. How did that look like? In Arabia, a Bengal Sultan endowed 2 major madrasas. By madrasa, I mean higher education institutions, like in University today, in Makkah and Medina, known as Bengal Madrasa, considered the counterflow. Some of them might be thinking, oh, Bengali ideas are flowing so much into Saudi Arabia, we're getting problem there, maybe. They also funded the upkeep of Arafat stream there. Then this large Waqf endowment served both piety and geopolitics, asserting Bengal's independence and direct links. With China, the Bengal Sultanate became a key partner in the Ming world order. Lavish tributes and emissaries were exchanged. Admiral Zheng Ho visited Bengal at least twice, stopping in Chittagong and Dhaka. As arguably the most powerful admiral of his time, Zheng He's presence was a clear statement of Bengal's strategic strength vis-a-vis Delhi. So I think I have to cut it down. Now to conclude, actually, I will conclude by saying that the Delta's ecology was central to sustaining Bengal's independence. For Delhi's rulers, it marked Bengal as the other of the Indian mainland. Firoz Shah Tughlaq in 13th century, early 14th century, he was unable to penetrate the Riverine defenses, ultimately conceded Bengal's independence. Centuries later, in 1946, when Nehru visited Noakhali, he remarked that this was not the India that he knew. And I think both moments underscore a recurring perception from North India that Bengal's ecology itself sustained a difference to Delhi, and for that matter, Islamabad. Briefly after 47, I'd say that Islamabad and Delhi were working for the same North Indian platform of power. They could never bridge the gap between them and the Bengal Delta in some way. But I'm also concerned about the way Bangladesh's internal political community has handled the environment question in the post-colonial time. At the time of the partition in 1947, Bangladesh had about 56,000 cubic meters of fresh water per capita, whereas India was left with only 5,000 cubic meters per capita. Yet Indian constitution mentions the word river, while Bangladeshi constitution doesn't. This is not a small omission. If you think deeply about the circumstances leading up to the framing of the constitution of Bangladesh in 72, ahead of the commissioning of Farakka. Another is a problem of Bengali creative intellectual encounter with Delta ecology. From Lalon Shah to Tagore to Jasimuddin to Ahmad Safa, nature has been a portal to cultivate spirituality and individual human aspirations, not recognizing the nature's own worth. Overall, the intellectual and political tradition in colonial and post-colonial Bengal has failed to reconcile between political ecology and creative and intellectual pursuit. This is exactly why ecology remains outside of the Bangladesh public sphere. The fact that post-revolution Bangladesh didn't see an environmental commission or a mention of this in the July Charter is a reflection of this lacuna embedded in the colonial perceptions of nature. For example, while Haji Shariatullah was fighting for Bengal Delta's peasantry within their ecological basis of life and livelihood, Lalun Shah was set out on an abstract spiritual quest that hardly resisted the violence and exploitation of colonial order. Not much later, when Maulana Bhashani was struggling to save the Riverine Delta's ecology for the survival of the poor and the marginals, Professor Abdul Razzaq did not even mention Farakka in his much noted State of the Nation lecture on water. So I hope in the days to come, the relatively new Bangladesh will find a way to reach a common ground on the Delta's ecological questions. That way, we also reopen meaningful conversations with a historical episode that saw a prosperous, just, sovereign, and globally connected Bangladesh, and also to a great green future. I will end this talk. I'll take 1 more minute. Just, I'll read out in Bangla. This is not, because this is more out of passion than academic pursuit. So I hope you pardon me. So, জুলাই সনদকে স্বাগত জানাই, কারণ এই সনদের মাধ্যমে রাষ্ট্র খাওয়া দুষ্টু ইঁদুরগুলোকে ধরার জন্য কিছু কঠিন বেড়ালের কথা বলা হয়েছে। সমস্যা একটাই, এই আকাঙ্ক্ষা ও আইনের বেড়ালগুলো যখন ইঁদুর বিরোধী অ্যাকশনে যাবে, তখন যদি টেবিলে ঢাকনা খোলা তাজা দুধের বাটি থাকে, বেড়ালের হ্যাডম তখন কোন দিকে যাবে? তখন দুপক্ষই বাটির দিকেই যাবে, তাই না? বাংলাদেশের ভূপ্রকৃতি ও পরিবেশ হলো সেই দুধ, সিলেটের পাথর এই দুধের সামান্য ক্রিম মাত্র। একটু বড় ক্যানভাসে যদি বিষয়টা আমরা দেখি, 47-এর ভাগাভাগির পর গোটা দক্ষিণ এশিয়াতে সবচেয়ে বেশি নদ নদী পানির প্রবাহ এই ছোট্ট বাংলাদেশটি ছিল, অথচ ভারতের সংবিধানে নদী শব্দটা আছে, বাংলাদেশের সংবিধানে নেই। সামাজিক বনায়নের নামে পাহাড়ি বনভূমি তছনছ করা হয়েছে, অষ্টগ্রামের পনিরের নাম ভাঙিয়ে হাওড় ধ্বংস করা হয়েছে, ক্লাইমেট প্রুফিংয়ের নামে বাংলাদেশে গোটা বদ্বীপ 100 বছরের বন্দোবস্তের আওতায় আনা হয়েছে, যমুনা নদীকে দুদিক থেকে ভরাট করে সরু করার দানবীয় পরিকল্পনাটি এই ডেল্টা প্ল্যানের অংশ। সমজদার আদমি কে লিয়ে ইশারায়ে কাফি হয়। এখন রবীন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুরের নামে বাংলাদেশের ফুসফুস চলন বিলে আরও একটা আঘাত করার চিন্তা হচ্ছে। বাংলাদেশকে যদি দুর্নীতিমুক্ত, জবাবদিহিমূলক গণতান্ত্রিক রাষ্ট্র হিসেবে আমরা গড়ে তুলতে চাই, তবে তা কার জন্যে? মানুষের জন্যে নিশ্চয়ই, কিন্তু মানুষের জীবন জীবিকা, স্বাস্থ্য, সৃষ্টিশীলতা, সর্বোপরি মানুষের অস্তিত্বের যে পাটাতন, পরিবেশ পরিস্থিতি এই খালবিলের উপর নির্ভরশীল। তাহলে নতুন বন্দোবস্ত তা নিয়ে কেন আমাদের আলোচনা হচ্ছে না? জাতীয়, আঞ্চলিক ও বৈশ্বিক পরিস্থিতি বিবেচনায় বাংলাদেশে অনেক মানুষ এমন একটা আশা করে যে পরিবেশ নিয়ে আলোচনা হবে। এবছরের জানুয়ারিতে, কিছুদিন আগে মাননীয় প্রধান উপদেষ্টা মহোদয় রাষ্ট্রের সর্বোচ্চ আসন থেকে তার অভিজ্ঞতার কথা বলতে গিয়ে বলেছেন যে পরিবেশ মন্ত্রণালয় থেকে কোনো প্রস্তাব এলে মনে করা হয় মশকরা করা হচ্ছে। বাংলাদেশ যারা শাসন করছেন বা ভবিষ্যতে করবেন, তারা তো বাংলা বদ্বীপের ভূপ্রকৃতির বিপুল ঐশ্বর্যের মধ্যে বেড়ে ওঠা, তারা এতটা অপ্রকৃতস্থ হবেন এটা কল্পনাতীত। আমি এটা বলেই আমার বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you, Iftekhar. The next speaker is Dr. Alex Taek-Gwang, Professor, Philosophy and Cultural Studies, Director of the Center for Technology in Humanities, Kyung University, Korea.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. And then, actually, I'm a philosopher. Actually, my major is actually the, political philosophy. So I would have a little bit different angle from the previous speaker. What I want to say is actually what happened at the moment is focusing on the topic of this panel. In my opinion, is we are now in the very the strange era. just like what we have at the moment is all kind of habitual perception of the world is now collapsing. For instance, the Trump, and then he destroyed all kind of some the rule, and he actually tried to create a new rule. I don't know what kind of rule actually he tried to create at the moment, but totally actually the chaotic moment we are experiencing at the moment. So from this perspective, I wanna to emphasize what happened in Bangladesh last year, July 2024. So Bangladesh, not only actually Bangladesh, the people, but all people around this world witnessed the so-called revolution. So according to very classical, the sense of political philosophy, what shaped a modern world. Actually, after the so-called medieval age, two actually elements actually shaping actually what we experience at the moment in terms of a modern society is revolution and state. All right, and then actually, in my opinion, another attempt after the end of Soviet bloc in 1990 to bring in the new paradigm for our world that was called neoliberalism. Neoliberalism tried to bring in a new standard of life, so-called market, against state and revolution. This is what actually the Hayek or some kind of Austrian the economist imagined or dreamt about to change the world after Second World War. So I think actually from this perspective, I want to locate what happened in 2024 in Bangladesh. Some kind of the long the change of this world after the Second World War. So now that we are experiencing crisis of this the post-war regime, what is the meaning of this post-war regime? Actually, a lot of scholars talked about sort of post-colonial period, where some people said decolonizing the era and whatever called. But anyway, just after the Second World War, everything we believed the solid is melting down. That is actually the world in which we lived. And there are lots of some theorists and lots of the economists and lots of scholars and the policy maker try to bring in the order. The after Second World War, and because they believed that the Second World War destroyed everything they believed the truth. And then similar situation has returned these days because we have another crisis of this the post-war system. And I think Trump is kind of symptomatic outcome of this kind of crisis. So from this perspective, we can understand what's the meaning of so-called July Revolution in Bangladesh. So what begins as a protest over civil service quota become an uprising that shook the foundation regime. Really actually looked like a really typical process of actually of dialectic between state and revolution. The more importantly shook the very foundation of a global order. This is a little bit, in my opinion, different aspect we should have found out in this Bangladesh July Revolution. That means actually this actual revolution showed that very typical process of dialectic, between a state and revolution. That means that revolution always resisting state, and state should be reconstructed or some reshaped by this revolutionary power, revolutionary actually the energy. But this dialectic, that means that actually what happened in Bangladesh last year, what caused another the impact on this global order. What is the global order? I told you that this is kind of neoliberal, the world system. So students filled a street. The state responded with a bullet. Over 1,000 lives were lost. And yet within weeks, the government fell. In Dhaka, it was the student, not the state, who organized the traffic, sanitation, even security. Actually, the new commune, emerged through this kind of revolution. This is a very typical outcome through this kind of revolution. But what actually remains at the moment is a question. And after this revolution, what gonna, come? What gonna come? And what should come? This is a really, really important one. That's why actually we need philosophy, we need a poet, we need, actually literature to actually bring in some kind of new imagination of this world. Without this new imagination of this world, we couldn't have new world. That's what I'm actually thinking about. Revolution is not the end of the world, it's the beginning of the world. And then we need actually the imagination. What kind of world we should have in future? So only future can be imagined by, according to many philosophers, three methods. First one is, of course, mathematics, science. Science could give us chance to imagine the world, which will come in the future. Another one is, of course, yes, art, or literature, poetry, and painting, whatever. Is a performative art, and art could actually give us what? Some imagination of a future. And then last, method by which we can imagine the world more rational way, not in emotional way, might be, as I said, philosophy. So actually, we need actually the concept to rationalize what kind of actually world we should recreate. At the moment, after the revolution. Revolution is not important in this sense. Revolution is a necessary process. Necessary process. If you have some ill, you need medicine. Just like that. Actually, you would, feel some kind of pain in your body. That is exactly revolution. Revolution is a necessary process. You cannot escape from that. And then problem is that what kind of actually, the plan you have after the revolution. This is actually a crucial question, and then it's not just only for the, the Bengali people, but for all people in the world. So actually what happened in, the Bangladesh last year is not just a Bengali event. It's actually, the event for all people, because we are now experiencing chaotic moment. Actually, this world is collapsing, but we don't have any new imagination of future world. It's really, really serious thing. So that's why actually I'm really actually impressed by this event. What happened in actually the last year in Bangladesh is organized by students. Organized by students, because a student in Asian country, you should know that actually regarded as a privileged class. That's why in the Russian Revolution, they didn't put a student in there. The Lenin didn't, regard it, the student as what actually revolutionary force. Even, actually the traditional sense of revolution, they didn't regard, the student. In the actual 18th century, student was actually part of this regime. There is a meaning of education, but after the Immanuel Kant, he actually reformulated the concept of enlightenment, and then he actually put forward a new concept, enlightenment, as critique. It's creating a new knowledge. And then how can you do that? How do you create the new knowledge? Through this, critique. That is what actually Immanuel Kant said. And since then, now the actual education actually gained another meaning against the actual very previous meaning. Previous meaning always said, what? Is the purpose of education is to bring in people who subversive to, subversive on the active kind of actually, obeyed actually onto this kind of regime. That was actually the original meaning of education, but Immanuel Kant changed this one. And then education is what? Is exactly the bring in your capacity to create your knowledge. How can you actually bring in your knowledge through critique? So actually what Kant said, of course actually I'm not sure actually Kantian the project was quite successful. If actually that idea was successful, we wouldn't have this kind of actually world. That means actually failure. The Kantian project actually failure. That's why actually we have this kind of chaotic world, you know. And then another one is, of course, yes, actually after the Kant, who actually gonna, you know, take on this kind of new project, of course, Karl Marx, you know. And then from this, you know, Karl Marx, the understanding of this world, of course, actually, Karl Marx, I don't say Karl Marx, you know, project also quite successful. I didn't say that. He actually had, you know, another project to to actually revolutionize the world through that actually new discovery of proletariat, is working class. He actually founded, he didn't actually make any theory of the revolution, but he actually emphasized what? The role of working class. You know, without working class, this capitalism cannot be sustainable. So, from this perspective, and actually, okay, he analyzed actually the European society in those days, 19th century, you know? And then, in those days, 19th century, what happened? In Asia, you know? European society in those days, we actually quite easily universalized European model, all right? And then we believe that that kind of European, the modernization, and then, you know, 19th century, the model of a European society as a kind of the universal model. But in those days, 19th century, you know, think about that. Think about your history in Bangladesh. We had a totally different world, you know? Not only actually the Asian people, but also non-Western people, so-called indigenous people in Latin America, Africa, and Southeastern Asia. Our ancestors had a totally different world. And then for those people, that means for Asian people in those, we didn't actually call, in those days, actually, our ancestors didn't call themselves Asian, you know? We had a different name. But that world, you know, our ancestors believed as a, you know, solid, you know, object is what? Destroyed by imperialism. That is our history. That means actually our history is not, you know, the modernizing, not, you know, post-colonial, not decolonizing history. Our history is a traumatic experience. You know, the world, what we believed is gone. That is Asian history. Now, actually, we have lots of, you know, idea. Even, you know, some fascist idea. We should go back to the origin. But very fortunately, in my opinion, Asian country, we don't have such an idea as actually we are witnessing in Europe and America. Because we don't have origin. Because that origin is gone. You know, the world, our ancestors believed, you know, the eternal has gone. That's what I'm saying. So that's why Asian people, in my opinion, naturally revolutionary. Because we don't have any origin. I'm from South Korea. We try to, you know, build up our origin, like, you know, Russia, like, you know, some France, and like America, okay, MAGA, you know, these days. But South Korea, we didn't have any such a glorious history, you know. That's why actually the Korean fascists, you know, didn't have any, you know, solid foundation to support their idea. That means actually the Asian country really, really what? Revolutionary. Revolutionary, because we don't have any solid past. We can recreate our past as we want. That's what I'm saying. So in this sense, so what happened in 2024 in Bangladesh really important. It showed that how Asian people imagine the future. You know, this student quite different from what actually, you know, we experience in Europe and America. You know, they try to actually bring in their own imagination of the future. This is important. So, and then from this perspective, I don't say actually quite optimistic the vision on the future of Bangladesh, because Bangladesh in the future is not just for the Bengalis people, but you know, in my opinion, actually, you know, the Bengalis, you know, the future, that means actually the future of Bangladesh is closely related to the, you know, global society's future. So because Bangladesh was held up as one of its success story through this system, neoliberalism, okay? Government exports and the microfinance, remittances. So a model for the global south. And then that means actually the Bangladesh
Alex,
reality is what?
Can you mind?
Shaped by this kind of a global system. Now we are actually facing up the actual crisis with this global system, and then we can find out this kind of link, the kind of weakest link in Bangladesh. And now do you have this kind of very revolutionary moment, and then through which I'm really actually looking forward, what kind of actual vision could be created, or what kind of imagination could be created through this kind of student, passion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alex. And now I would like to request Dr. Irfan Ahmad, Professor, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Department of Sociology, Ibn Haldun University, Turkey, to give his presentation.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. What I want to focus on is, of course, revolution takes place in the streets and on the campuses. But as historians have said, revolution also takes place in the ways in which it is narrated. The other way to say is that how it is also distorted. So what I'm going to focus is that how this revolution or uprising has been distorted. And therefore, the title of my presentation is How Hindu Orientalism Negates the True Meaning of the 2024 Revolution. And also the significance of the name itself, 36th of July. To name the 2024 Bangladesh uprising as 36th July is simply brilliant. Indeed, it is poetic, because it breaks the rule to extend the month beyond its duration of 30 days until the goal of the uprising, shifting, expanding, evolving, but seldom compromising, is realized. It is like a lover waiting for the beloved in the promised evening to arrive, but the beloved doesn't. However, for the lover, despite its end, the evening continues in the insistent hope of the beloved arriving soon enough. In fact, whenever the beloved arrives, it marks the evening, or as the beloved arrives, so does the evening. There are two main ways in which to read this poetic idea of extending the month, which was floated in a Facebook post by Muhammad Shamsul Alam, a Bangladeshi based in America. First, the audacity with which the post both displayed and beaconed to the hope. The short post began as follows: July has been extended until victory. An early comment on Alam's post read, Inshallah, fi amanillah. Others commented as follows: May Allah accept it, and Ameen. The audacity of hope was supranational and territorial, as it connected America, where Alam was based, and Bangladesh, where protesters of many shades, ideologies, and strata took to the streets in Dhaka, Chittagong, Rajashahi, Jahangirnagar, and elsewhere. But the connection was diachronic as well, as it linked the living and the dead alike. It seemed as if the ruh of the poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz was singing from a place with no name, hence from everywhere. तुम्हाए हो न शबे इंतजार गुजरी है, तलाश में है सहर बार बार गुजरी है. Neither have you come, nor has this night of waiting ended. In your search, the dawn has passed by again and again. This audacity of hope in Faiz's couplet was evident in the marches in the streets and on university campuses across Bangladesh, declaring loud and clear, July will continue until the dark night of tyranny continues. Second, the idea of extending July beyond its routine duration is grounded in the sheer resolve to continue the resistance and defy the terror let loose everywhere. In mutual embrace, hope and resolve in turn flows from as well as solidifies the faith. Innamal asra yusra, indeed with hardship comes ease. Historically, July 36 is part of the genealogy of the 19th century collective action, traceable to the Farazi movement inspired by Haji Shariatullah and continued by his son Dudu Miah, whose real name was Mohsinuddin Ahmad and who died in Dhaka. And the struggle for dignity and justice by Haji Shariatullah and Dudu Miah is comprehensible only in the wake of valiant fight against colonial rule by Siraj-ud-Daulah and his subsequent execution by the British and their puppet Mir Jafar. The martyrdom of Abu Said must be seen in line with this stream of politics in the subcontinent after the British rule. Abu Said's martyrdom is truly defining and iconic well beyond Bangladesh because it reflects an alternative ethical politics, one which is not yet recognized. As an example of a student movement, contrast it with the self-immolation in 1990 by Rajiv Goswami, a Brahmin student of Delhi University and an aspiring career politician, which unleashed countrywide protest. Against the Mandal reservation, the 20-year-old Goswami set himself on fire. But the self-immolation was pure drama. The night before the farcical suicide, Goswami told his mother, and I quote, "Hum sirf tamasha karne ja rahe hain. We are simply going to stage a drama." Hence, he did not die. But the place where he staged the drama was named as Qurbani Chowk, Sacrifice Chowk. In sharp contrast, facing the police bullet with both his arms wide open, Abu Said bared his chest. Displaying exemplary courage, he stood his ground even as he was shot 4 times point blank. Abu Said's family refused making any statue of Abu Said, and unlike Goswami, who the night before his fake suicide told his mother that this was all a spectacle or tamasha, 2 days before he embraced martyrdom, Abu Said's Facebook post on 14 July declared, "Regardless of whether it is unpleasant, I will not hesitate to call justice, justice, and injustice, injustice." As it is well known, in April 2024, if not before, Abu Said had signaled the sources of his thought and ethics as stemming from the repertoire of Islam. My exposition on the naming of the July Revolution and the significance of Abu Said's martyrdom will not please the parrot supporters of the world's largest democracy, India. Commentators in India peddle stories based on the so-called insider perspective from Bangladesh that the July 36 uprising was a jihadi coup. For India's Economic Times, the July uprising means promoting anti-India terror. Such responses from India, the regional hegemon and aspiring superpower, are not surprising at all. And the so-called Indian liberal left too has historically been part, even an advocate of Hindu nationalism masquerading as Indian nationalism. In chapter 2 of The Origins of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt speaks of leftist anti-Semitism. It is long due to speak of leftist Islamophobia in India well before the partition of the subcontinent. Since currently left is often hyphenated with liberals, its figures include such intellectuals and politicians as Nehru, Sitaram Yechuri, and award-winning radicals like Arundhati Roy. In fact, the earliest figure is Raja Ram Mohan Rai, a stooge or chamcha of the British Empire who, after the martyrdom of Siraj-ud-Daulah, openly welcomed the British rule and designated Muslims as enemy. Let us recall that the Hindu merchants happily collaborated with the East India Company, without which there would be no Permanent Settlement Act of 1793. This act led to the pauperization of Bengal, particularly its Muslim plebeian. My argument is that any ethical, autonomous, and sovereign reading of the July 36 is impossible without liberation from the shackles of Hindu Orientalism. Hindu Orientalism is an episteme at the core of the Calcutta Hindu Bhadralok, but not limited to them. And it includes historians such as Dipesh Chakravarti, anthropologists like Nirmal Kumar Bose, and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. Outside of Calcutta Bhadralok circle, example of Hindu Orientalism is Siddharth Vardarajan. The difference, if any, between Siddharth Vardarajan and Arnab Goswami is that Arnab expresses his Hindu Orientalism in anger, while Siddharth does the same with occasional smile. And I'm glad to note that he's listening. Hindu Orientalism shapes knowledge not only about India, but also about the subcontinent at large. In fact, about the West too. It is because of this Hindu Orientalism that left liberal Islamophobe in India or elsewhere either lack courage or imagination or both to ask the following question. Why is the world's largest democracy hosting the enemy of the mass uprising in Bangladesh? If it is hosting an autocrat, is India democracy in the first place? Notably, what is democracy? Periodic electoral campaigns as bloody spectacles? If so, has not anti-Islam been the center of all such campaigns at least since 1980s? Which democracy celebrates lynching of Muslims and bulldozing of homes? Well, India and Israel foremost. What else is the reason for India to grant visa to Taslima Nasreen or Tariq Fateh, but to legitimize Hindutva and spread hate against Islam? And by the way, they are called as intellectuals in Indian circle. Finally, to pay homage to the predecessor of the July 36 uprising, like Haji Shariatullah as well as its current actors such as Abu Said, is to mark the limits of nationalism as an emancipatory ideology. Haji Shariatullah was an anti-colonial thinker and activist, not a nationalist by any means. The fact that actors of the July 36 uprising spoke in favor of Palestine and carried banners to decolonize Gaza is remarkable. In some ways, they echoed the women-led Shaheen Bagh movement in India, a movement which was not asking for so-called inclusive nationalism, but instead demonstrating the underbelly of nationalism as an inherently ethnic ideology and practice. To conclude, for the goal of the revolution to actualize and to respect the value of martyrdom of the likes of Abu Said is to announce intellectual freedom from Hindu Orientalism, which is equally and also Western Orientalism. Thank you.
We have heard a lot of learned papers, and somehow the riverine landscape got lost in modern politics. So I will try to wind up by saying a few words about the riverine landscape. From our childhood in our geography books, one of the first sentences that introduced Bengal was that Bengal was Nodi Matrik. This word literally means born from the rivers. So this land, this delta, is actually born from the rivers. The rivers have created it. The river sometimes destroys it. It fertilizes it. It provides the best means of communication. And we owe our lives to it. If the rivers die, we die. I'm reminded at the same time of a song which we knew in our youth, which was sung by a very well-known singer whose name was Hemanto Mukherjee. And this song was, O Nodire, Bolo Kothay Tomar Desh, Tomar Nei Ki Cholar Shesh. It means, tell me, O river, where is your country, or which is your country? Is there no end to your journey? Nodir kono desh nei. There is no country that the river belongs to. The river belongs to everyone. And this is something that we have to remember, our politicians have to remember, because if we kill our rivers because they come from some other country, we will not live ourselves. Most of our rivers, the sources are somewhere in India, somewhere in China. They flow through Assam, they flow through the whole of India, and then come and deposit their silt to be taken away by the Bay of Bengal. So we know where the river ends. It ends in the sea. But we have ended that journey. Dhaka at one time was surrounded by rivers. There was the Shitalakha, Buriganga, Turag, and the city itself was traversed by lots of canals. I still remember when we journeyed from Wari to Lokhi Bajar, where I used to go to school. We used to cross the Dholai Khal. And in those days, huge, big boats carrying wood and other goods would go through the canal. Now the canal doesn't exist. The Turag is like a little flow of water. So we've killed the rivers. And in the name of development-driven political rule, we have, the whole world is going through a climate crisis. But I think we have we've surpassed others because we have killed the very source of our lives, because we are killing the rivers. So unless we go back to that, we realize that we are a delta. In fact, the largest delta in the world. So our lives will depend on it. And I hope that as Dr. Alex has said, that this revolution was like a surgery. It was meant to be a cure to an illness. So if it was that, then let us not revert back to that illness. Let us not go back to that sick state where we will not think of the people, but think of how, as I said, to perpetuate our rule. Not to do that, but to think of the people, their lives, their livelihoods, how will they live? So our generation, who belongs to, I would say, the same generation as the regime you've got rid of, we are leaving you with a lot of problems. And one of the most outstanding, that was something just screaming in the face, is save our rivers, save this land. So we need a surgical operation now. And I hope that this July revolution will not revert back to those policies which resulted in that kind of critical illness. And we will go forward to a state of well-being and survive. Because it is a matter of survival. It is a matter of an ecology that is being finished, that is dying. So unless we all come together for that, there is no cure for this. So let us plan. We need development. We need to go forward, but we must think about it. We must not do it at any cost. And first of all, let us think in a way that our rivers will live, because only then we will live. Thank you.